The contract. The obsidian walls of the Crimson Hand's headquarters absorbed light like a hungry void. Deep within the ancient structure on Vargoth Prime, Master Assassin Creven studied the holographic display with his 3 golden eyes. Each eye could focus independently, allowing him to process multiple data streams simultaneously. This advantage had made him the most successful killer in the Guild's 1,000-year history. His scaled skin, dark purple and perfectly smooth, reflected the soft glow of the display as his clawed fingers manipulated the interface. The contract glowed in crimson text, as all high-value targets did. The client remained anonymous, protected by layers of encryption that even the Crimson Hand respected. The target's face rotated slowly in the holographic field. Sarah Chen, human, age 37, trade negotiator for the Terran Commerce Authority. She would be arriving at Meridian Hub in 6 standard cycles to finalize mining rights agreements that would give humanity access to rare Earth elements in the Kepler sector. Someone wanted those negotiations to fail permanently. Creven's mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among his species. He summoned his team with a thought transmitted through his neural implant. They arrived within minutes, each one a master of death in their own right. First came Siltha, a Vraxian, whose entire body could phase through solid matter for brief periods. She moved like smoke, her translucent form barely visible even in direct light. Her species had developed this ability on their homeworld, where predators hunted by vibration rather than sight. Next entered Gorvex, a massive Crothian whose muscles were denser than steel cables. He stood 3 meters tall with 4 arms, each one capable of crushing bone like dried clay. His homeworld had heavy gravity, nearly 4 times Earth standard, making him devastatingly strong in normal environments. Finally, Nirzex slithered into the chamber. The Sarkhan was a master of toxins and biological warfare. His serpentine body contained dozens of poison glands, each one producing venoms that could kill in seconds. His black scales glistened with natural oils that made him nearly impossible to grab or hold. Creven addressed his team with calm authority. The contract was straightforward. Eliminate the human negotiator before she could finalize the agreements. The client wanted it to appear accidental. No traces, no evidence, no witnesses. The Crimson Hand had eliminated kings, corporate executives, and military commanders. One human diplomat should present no challenge whatsoever. Gorvex rumbled a question about the target's security detail. Creven pulled up additional files. Sarah Chen traveled with a small team, 3 security specialists and a technical advisor. All human, all former military according to their public records. Nothing exceptional. Humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 83 years ago. They were still newcomers to galactic society, barely understanding the political complexities that older species navigated with ease. Siltha's voice was like wind through hollow reeds. She asked about human capabilities. What were their strengths, their weaknesses? What made them dangerous? Creven pulled up the species profile. Humans were classified as bipedal mammals from a planet designated Earth. They had average strength, slightly below galactic median. Their reaction time was moderate. They possessed no natural weapons, no venom, no armored skin, no special sensory abilities. They could not phase through matter like Siltha or match Gorvex's strength. They were, by all measurable standards, unremarkable. Then Nirzex noticed something in the file. A small notation at the bottom of Earth's planetary classification. Deathworld, Class 12. Creven dismissed it with a gesture. Many species evolved on harsh worlds. The classification meant little. Earth was dangerous by the standards of garden worlds where most spacefaring civilizations developed, but that did not make its inhabitants particularly formidable. A hostile environment shaped survival instincts, nothing more. The team had eliminated targets from 7 different Deathworld species. Humans would be no different. They spent the next 3 cycles preparing. Creven studied every detail of Sarah Chen's schedule. She would arrive on Meridian Hub, a massive, trading station neutral territory where thousands of species conducted business. The station's security was thorough but not perfect. The Crimson Hand had operatives embedded in the station's systems. Cameras could be blinded. Security patrols could be redirected. Entire sections could be isolated without triggering alarms. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Siltha would phase through the walls of Chen's quarters and introduce a slow-acting toxin into her air supply. The human would die in her sleep from what appeared to be natural causes. If that failed, Gorvex would create a structural accident that would kill the target and her team. If somehow both attempts failed, Nurzex would deploy a biological agent that mimicked a natural disease outbreak. 3 backup plans for one target. Overkill, perhaps, but the Crimson Hand's reputation demanded perfection. They arrived at Meridian, hubbed separately, each using different identities and entry points. The station was enormous, a city in space housing over 2 million beings from hundreds of species. Merchants hawked exotic goods in multi-level marketplaces. Diplomats conducted quiet negotiations in soundproof chambers. Criminals conducted business alongside legitimate traders. Security was tight enough to prevent major incidents, but loose enough to allow profitable illegality. Creven established himself in a rented suite with a clear view of the docking bay where the human ship would arrive. He watched through surveillance feeds that his embedded operatives provided. The human vessel approached with standard protocols. Nothing unusual in its flight pattern or communication. It was a medium-sized diplomatic craft designated the Far Horizon, displaying Terran Commerce Authority markings. The ship docked smoothly. The airlock cycled, and Sarah Chen emerged. She was shorter than Creven expected, barely 1.7 meters tall. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical style. She wore simple business clothing rather than any ceremonial diplomatic attire. Nothing about her appearance suggested she was aware of any danger. She smiled and waved to the station's greeting committee with apparently genuine warmth. Then her security team stepped out, and Creven felt his first flicker of doubt. The leader was a man named Marcus Webb, according to the files. He moved with economy of motion that spoke of deep training. His eyes were constantly moving, but not in the obvious scanning pattern most security personnel used. Instead, he seemed to absorb his surroundings without focusing on anything specific. His body positioning placed him between potential threats and his principal without making it obvious he was doing so. The second security specialist was a woman named Rachel Torres. She walked slightly behind and to the right of Chen, maintaining a position that covered Webb's blind spots. Her hand rested casually near her equipment belt, but Creven noticed her thumb was already on the quick-release catch of what was probably a weapon. The third was younger, a man named David Park, who appeared relaxed and friendly as he chatted with the station officials. But his eyes never stopped moving, and his stance allowed him to shift to combat readiness in a fraction of a second. The technical advisor was Dr. Elizabeth Mora, listed as an expert in mineral extraction and processing. She carried a data pad and several scanner devices, appearing completely absorbed in technical readings. Yet Creven noticed she positioned herself to maintain visual contact with her companions at all times. The 4 humans moved through the station in formation. It looked casual to untrained eyes. They seemed to be simply walking together. But Creven recognized tactical movement when he saw it. They maintained spacing that prevented them from being targeted simultaneously. They never blocked each other's sightlines. They communicated through gestures so subtle, most species would miss them entirely. These were not ordinary security personnel. These were operators. Creven contacted his team through encrypted neural links. Siltha reported she was in position near the humans' assigned quarters. Gorvex confirmed he had access to the station's structural support systems. Nirzex was prepared to release his biological agents on command. Everything was ready. But something bothered Creven. He watched the humans stop at a cafe in one of the station's social districts. They sat at a table that provided clear sight lines in all directions. Marcus Webb sat with his back to a wall. Rachel Torres positioned herself to watch the entrance. David Park monitored the other patrons. Dr. Mora appeared to be reviewing data, but her body language suggested heightened awareness. Sarah Chen ordered local food and drinks, engaging in friendly conversation with the cafe owner. She seemed genuinely interested in learning about different cultures and customs. There was no obvious paranoia, no excessive caution. Yet her security team maintained constant vigilance without appearing tense or nervous. Then something happened that made Craven's scales prickle with unease. A Delvaxian merchant bumped into their table, a genuine accident in the crowded cafe. The merchant apologized profusely while collecting his dropped packages. It was a perfect opportunity for surveillance or attack. Standard procedure. Marcus Webb thanked the merchant politely while helping collect packages. But in that brief interaction, Webb's eyes met the Delvaxian's gaze for exactly 2.3 seconds. Long enough to make a subconscious threat assessment. The merchant, who had no hostile intent whatsoever, found himself deeply uncomfortable and hurried away faster than necessary. Rachel Torres had shifted her weight during the interaction, her center of balance changing in preparation for explosive movement. David Park's hand had moved within centimeters of his weapon without actually touching it. Dr. Mora had stopped looking at her datapad entirely. Her attention focused on the merchant with laser intensity. Then, just as quickly, they all relaxed. The moment passed. They returned to their conversation as if nothing had happened, but Craven had seen it. That instant of collective readiness, that coordinated response to potential threat. Most species would have missed it entirely. It happened too fast, too subtle, but Craven had observed thousands of security details. He had studied protective formations from dozens of civilizations. He had never seen four beings move together with such perfect synchronization. Siltha's voice whispered through the neural link. She was concerned. She had phased through the walls near the humans' quarters to scout the location. The rooms had been modified. Equipment had been installed that she could not identify. Sensors of some kind, positioned to cover every possible approach. The air filtration system had been upgraded with military-grade filters. Even the door locks had been replaced with custom hardware. The humans had been on the station for less than 3 hours and had already fortified their position. Craven made a decision. They would proceed with the toxin attempt tonight while the humans slept. Siltha's phasing ability made her undetectable by conventional sensors. She would introduce the poison and withdraw before anyone knew she was there. The humans would wake to find their principal dead from apparent natural causes. Quick, clean, professional. Night cycle came to Meridian Hub as the station's massive light panels dimmed to simulate planetary darkness. The corridors emptied as most inhabitants retired to their quarters. Siltha moved through the shadows, her form barely more substantial than mist. She approached the humans' quarters on silent feet. The corridors were empty. Security cameras had been disabled by Craven's operatives. This section of the station was isolated, sealed off from potential witnesses. Everything was perfect. Siltha activated her phasing ability and stepped toward the wall. Her molecules became unstable, existing partially in normal space and partially in subspace. She could pass through solid matter like it was not there. The wall's surface rippled as she made contact and she began to sink through. Then, impossibly, alarms shrieked throughout the corridor. Siltha jerked back, solidifying instantly. The wall remained intact. How? Her phasing ability was undetectable. No known sensor could track subspace intrusions. The technology did not exist, except apparently it did. The human's door exploded open. Marcus Webb emerged already armed, his weapon tracking toward her position with inhuman speed. Rachel Torres came out low and fast, moving to flank. David Park appeared in the doorway with something that looked like a rifle but gleamed with unfamiliar technology. Siltha did the only thing she could. She ran. She phased through walls and floors, descending 3 levels in seconds. Behind her, she heard the humans pursuing. Not just running blindly, but moving with purpose and coordination. They were tracking her somehow, following her phased movement through the station's structure. Impossible. Completely impossible. She emerged in a maintenance tunnel and solidified, gasping for breath. Phasing consumed enormous energy. She needed to rest to recover. But the sounds of pursuit grew closer. Siltha fled deeper into the station, her confidence shattered. The simple contract had become something else entirely. The unremarkable humans had detected an undetectable intrusion and responded with speed that rivaled her own species. Craven's voice crackled through the neural link, demanding a report. Siltha could barely form coherent words. The attempt had failed. The humans knew. They were hunting her now, and somewhere in her ancient predatory instincts buried beneath millennia of civilization, A warning signal began screaming. These were not prey. These were something else entirely. The hunt becomes the hunted. Creven stared at the holographic display in disbelief. The station's sensor log showed Siltha's retreat path, a desperate flight through walls and floors that should have been completely hidden from detection. Yet the humans had tracked her every movement with precision that suggested they could see her phased form. That should not have been possible. Siltha had collapsed in a hidden maintenance room 7 levels below the human quarters. Her vital signs indicated severe exhaustion, but no injuries. She was alive, but her confidence had been shattered. The hunter had become the hunted, and her survival instincts were screaming warnings her conscious mind struggled to process. Gorvex's voice rumbled through the neural link. He wanted to know if they were aborting the mission. The Crimson Hand had never abandoned a contract once accepted, but they had also never faced a target with such unexpected capabilities. Standard protocol suggested withdrawal and reassessment. Creven's mandibles clicked in frustration. His reputation was built on success. The Guild's 1,000-year record of completion was maintained through his leadership. One human negotiator and her small security team should not have posed any challenge. The failure must have been a fluke, a lucky installation of unusual sensors, nothing more. He ordered Gorvex to proceed with the structural accident. It was crude compared to their usual methods, but effectiveness mattered more than elegance now. They would kill the targets and complete the contract, then investigate how the humans had detected Siltha. Gorvex moved through the station's maintenance tunnels with surprising stealth for his massive size. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world where falls were instantly fatal, making them exceptionally careful despite their strength. He reached the structural support column that ran beneath the human quarters. The plan was simple: weaken the support, then trigger a collapse that would look like a tragic system failure. The humans would be crushed before they could react. Station investigations would find evidence of metal fatigue and improper maintenance. No assassination, just a tragic accident. Gorvex placed specialized charges at key stress points. The explosives were designed to mimic structural failures, leaving no chemical traces of sabotage. He worked with methodical precision, his forearms moving independently to set each charge perfectly. The timer was set for 15 minutes, enough time for him to reach a safe distance. He activated the sequence and began his withdrawal. Then he heard footsteps, not the random sounds of station personnel going about their business. These were deliberate, coordinated, moving with purpose directly toward his location. Gorvex enhanced his hearing, using the implants that most assassins carried. 3 sets of footsteps. Moving in formation, communicating through whispered sounds that suggested military training. They were tracking him. Somehow they knew he was here. Gorvex made a decision. He was a Crothian warrior before he became an assassin. His species did not flee from humans, newcomers who barely understood galactic politics. He would eliminate these trackers, complete the mission, and restore the Guild's reputation. He positioned himself in a junction where multiple tunnels met, giving him multiple attack angles. His forearms tensed, ready to strike with force that could crumple steel. His dense muscles coiled like compressed springs. The footsteps grew closer. The humans were not being cautious. They walked openly, confidently, as if they knew exactly where he waited. Marcus Webb turned the corner first. Gorvex struck with all 4 arms simultaneously, a devastating attack that should have pulverized the human instantly. But Webb was not where Gorvex expected him to be. The human had dropped low at the last instant, rolling beneath the strikes with impossible fluidity. Rachel Torres came next, but instead of retreating from a failed ambush, she advanced directly toward Gorvex. Her hands moved in a blur, striking nerve clusters in his lower arms with precision that suggested detailed knowledge of Crothian anatomy. Pain exploded through his limbs, pain he had not felt since his youth. David Park emerged from a different tunnel, flanking from a direction Gorvex had not covered. He carried a weapon that fired projectiles, but instead of shooting, he targeted Gorvex's knee joint with pinpoint accuracy. The massive assassin stumbled. In the heavy gravity of his homeworld, such a wound would have been manageable. Here, in standard station gravity, his balance was disrupted completely. He crashed into the tunnel wall hard enough to dent the metal. Then they were on him. 3 humans, each weighing less than half his mass, working together with coordination that spoke of hundreds of training hours. They did not try to overpower him. Instead, they targeted joints, pressure points, vulnerable areas that even Crothian strength could not fully protect. Gorvex fought with desperate fury. One lucky blow sent David Park flying backward into a wall, but Rachel Torres immediately filled the gap, and Marcus Webb moved to disable another of his arms. They were patient, methodical, wearing him down through superior technique rather than superior strength. Within 30 seconds, Gorvex realized he was losing. Within 60 seconds, he understood he would die if he stayed. He made a choice that would haunt him forever. He fled. A Crothian warrior, descended from champions who had conquered his entire homeworld, ran from 3 humans who should have been easy prey. He crashed through a maintenance panel and dropped down a service shaft, using his remaining strength to slow his fall. Behind him, he heard the humans calling to each other in calm, professional tones. Not victory shouts, not even excitement, just tactical communication. Gorvex reached a transport tube and forced his massive frame inside, ignoring the pain from multiple injuries. The tube carried him 3 sectors away before he dared to exit. He collapsed in an abandoned storage area, breathing hard, trying to process what had happened. Nurzex's voice hissed through the neural link. The Sarkin had been monitoring from his concealed position. He had witnessed Gorvex's defeat through security feeds that Creven's operatives controlled. His analysis was simple and terrifying. The humans had known exactly where Gorvex would be. They had prepared for his specific combat style. They had studied Crothian anatomy and identified vulnerabilities. They had not been surprised by his strength or his forearmed attack pattern. They had expected everything. Creven felt something he had not experienced in decades. Fear, not the adrenaline of combat or the tension of a difficult mission. Real primal fear. The humans were not lucky. They were not merely competent. They were operating on a level that suggested they had been preparing for this encounter since before they even reached the station. How? How could they have known? Dr. Mora's technical expertise suddenly made sense. She was not just studying mineral extraction. She was analyzing everything around them, feeding data to her companions, building tactical profiles of potential threats. The security team was not just protecting Sarah Chen. They were hunting. Crevan made a desperate decision. Nurzex would deploy his biological weapon. It was indiscriminate and would kill hundreds of station inhabitants along with the targets, violating the guild's code against collateral damage. But their reputation was already ruined. They had failed twice. If they did not complete this contract, the Crimson Hand would be finished as a viable assassin organization. Nurzex moved through the station's environmental systems with serpentine grace. His toxin was a masterwork of biological engineering. It would spread through the air ducts as an invisible aerosol, then activate 12 hours later. Victims would experience massive organ failure that mimicked a natural disease outbreak. By the time station medical personnel understood what was happening, the targets would be dead. He reached the primary air circulation hub and prepared to release the toxin. His poison glands began producing the compound, a process that took several minutes but ensured maximum potency. Then a voice spoke from behind him in accented but understandable Galactic standard. That would be a very bad idea. Nurzex spun, his fangs extending, venom already dripping. Dr. Mora stood in the doorway alone, unarmed, looking at him with calm interest. Your toxin, she continued, is derived from Sarkin biology. High mortality rate, difficult to trace, mimics natural disease. Quite elegant, really, Nurzex hissed a warning. The human did not retreat. The problem, Dr. Mora said, tapping her datapad, is that we've been monitoring your biological signatures since you came aboard. We isolated your unique pheromones approximately 6 hours ago. We've been tracking you ever since. Impossible. Sarkin pheromones were undetectable by any technology known to galactic science. Nurzex had spent decades ensuring his biological signature could not be traced. You're wondering how, Dr. Mora said, as if reading his thoughts. Dogs. Nurzex's translator struggled with the word. A canine species from Earth, apparently. For thousands of years, the human continued. Humans bred dogs to detect chemical compounds, explosives, drugs, diseases, even emotional states. We got very good at building sensors based on biological detection methods. Your pheromones are invisible to standard sensors, but quite obvious to our modified equipment. She took a step forward. Nirzex prepared to strike, but something in her expression made him hesitate. You've been made, she said simply. Station security is surrounding this area as we speak. You have two choices. Surrender and face galactic justice, or try to kill me and die when my team breaches this room in approximately 30 seconds. Nirzex could hear them now. Multiple footsteps approaching from different directions. The humans had boxed him in. He did something he had never done in his entire career. He surrendered. Marcus Webb and his team secured Nirzex with bonds designed for his species. They were polite and professional, offering no threats or violence. They simply contained him efficiently and called for station security. Krevin watched it all through hacked surveillance feeds, his mind racing. 3 attempts. 3 failures. 3 master assassins defeated by humans who should have been easy targets. The Deathworld classification echoed in his memory. Class 12. With trembling claws, Kreven accessed the full database entry for Earth. He had dismissed it before, but now he read every detail with growing horror. Earth was not just dangerous. It was a nightmare world that should not have produced intelligent life. Gravity was higher than average. Weather systems were violent and unpredictable. The planet hosted thousands of predator species, many of which hunted in coordinated packs. Diseases evolved at accelerated rates. Even plant life was aggressive and hostile. Humans had evolved in constant warfare against their own planet. They had developed persistence hunting, the ability to track prey for days without rest. They had evolved pattern recognition systems capable of detecting subtle environmental cues. They had developed pack bonding that created loyalty beyond rational self-interest. Most terrifying of all, they had evolved threat detection systems refined by millions of years of being both predator and prey. Human brains were designed to detect danger. They processed micro-expressions, body language, and environmental anomalies at subconscious levels. They could sense when something was wrong without being able to articulate why. Their ancestors who lacked these abilities had been killed by ambush predators. Only the paranoid survived. No wonder they had detected Siltha. No wonder they had anticipated Gorvax's ambush. No wonder they had tracked Nirzex through methods the galaxy had never encountered. Humans were not remarkable by galactic standards. They were extraordinary by survival standards. Kreven made his final decision. He activated the emergency extraction protocol and transmitted a priority message to Crimson Hand leadership. Abort mission. Target is Deathworld origin. Recommend immediate withdrawal and blacklist for all human targets. Guild reputation secondary to operative survival. Evacuation in progress. Then he ran. He fled Meridian Hub on the first available transport, not caring about subtlety or cover identity. He just needed to be away from the humans, away from creatures who could hunt the galaxy's best hunters. Siltha and Gorvex followed, abandoning equipment and safe houses. Nirzex was left to galactic justice, a sacrifice to ensure the others' escape. As Kreven's ship entered faster-than-light travel, leaving the human sector behind, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of his failure. The Crimson Hand's perfect record was broken, not by luck, not by unexpected circumstances, but by fundamental miscalculation about what humans actually were. They were Deathworlders, and the galaxy was only beginning to understand what that meant. The Deathworlder revelation. The safe house on Vargoth Prime felt like a tomb. Kreven sat in darkness, his 3 golden eyes reviewing the mission logs for the 100th time. Each attempt, each failure burned into his mind with crystal clarity. Siltha occupied a corner, her translucent form barely visible even to his enhanced vision. She had barely spoken since their escape. Gorvex stood by the sealed entrance, his forearms wrapped around himself in a posture Crothians adopted when dealing with psychological trauma. The silence was broken by an encrypted transmission from the Crimson Hands Council. They demanded a full debriefing. The Guild's reputation had taken a catastrophic hit. News of their failure had spread through the criminal networks with shocking speed. Rival organizations were already questioning whether the Crimson Hand could handle contracts that involved humans. Kreven explained everything in a steady voice. The detection of Siltha's phasing, the tactical sophistication of the human security team, the biological tracking of Nirzex. He left nothing out, knowing that his career was effectively over regardless of how this conversation ended. The Council's response came after a long pause. They wanted to understand, how could one species, new to galactic civilization, demonstrate such disproportionate effectiveness against trained killers? Krivan transmitted the data he had compiled on Earth. The full planetary classification report, not the abbreviated version he had initially dismissed. The Council reviewed it in real time, and Krivan could hear their sharp intake of breath as they absorbed the information. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, the highest danger rating ever applied to a planet that successfully produced intelligent civilization. Most Class 12 worlds were barren or hosted only simple organisms. Life on such planets rarely survived long enough to develop sentience. Earth was the exception, a statistical anomaly that had produced not just intelligent life, but apex predators that dominated their entire planetary ecosystem. The Council demanded specifics. What made humans so dangerous? Craven pulled up the evolutionary analysis. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters on the African savanna. Unlike most predators who relied on speed or strength for quick kills, humans used endurance. They could track wounded prey for days, running at a steady pace that allowed them to cover enormous distances without rest. Their prey would flee initially, but humans would simply follow, never stopping, never losing the trail. Eventually, the prey would collapse from exhaustion. Humans would catch up and finish the kill. It was not fast or dramatic, but it was utterly inevitable. This hunting style had shaped human physiology in fundamental ways. Their cardiovascular systems were exceptional. Humans could maintain physical activity for extended periods that would exhaust most species. They could function effectively on minimal sleep for days when necessary. Their bodies were designed to keep moving, keep hunting, keep pursuing. Their pattern recognition abilities were extraordinary. Human brains processed environmental cues at subconscious levels, detecting anomalies and threats before conscious thought engaged. This was how Rachel Torres had sensed Siltha's presence. Something had been wrong, something subtle, and her hindbrain had reacted before she could articulate why. Their pack bonding created loyalty beyond rational calculation. Humans would risk death to protect pack members, fighting with suicidal determination when their companions were threatened. This was why the security team had moved with such perfect coordination. They were not following trained protocols. They were protecting pack. Most terrifying was their threat assessment system. Humans had been both predators and prey during their evolution. They had hunted dangerous game while being hunted by apex predators like lions and crocodiles. This dual nature had created minds that constantly evaluated danger, always preparing for attack, never fully relaxed even in safe environments. Marcus Webb had made threat assessments in fractions of a second because his brain was designed to do exactly that. Millions of years of evolution had programmed human minds to identify predatory behavior instantly. Craven and his team had been the best of the best among their respective species. But they had been hunting creatures who spent millions of years learning to recognize hunters. The Council was silent for a long moment. Then they asked the question that would reshape the criminal underworld's relationship with humanity. Were all humans like this? Or was Sarah Chen's security team exceptional even by human standards? Krivan had researched this during his flight from Meridian Hub. The answer was both reassuring and terrifying. Not all humans had military training. The majority of their population lived peaceful civilian lives. But every human carried these evolutionary advantages. Every human had enhanced endurance, threat detection, and pack bonding instincts. The security team was exceptional not because they were different from other humans, but because they had professional training layered on top of natural abilities that most species simply did not possess. They had taken genetic advantages and refined them through discipline and practice, but even untrained humans were more dangerous than the galaxy realized. They might not have tactical expertise, but they had instincts that would make them formidable opponents in any survival situation. The Council issued immediate directives. The Crimson Hand would add human targets to its blacklist indefinitely. The Guild would conduct extensive research into human capabilities before reconsidering any contracts involving Earth natives. Other assassin organizations would be quietly informed of the risks. Most importantly, the Council ordered comprehensive analysis of humanity's potential impact on galactic power dynamics. If humans were this dangerous as individuals, what would they become as they spread through the stars? Krivan dove into research, treating it like a mission because it was the only way he could process his failure. He studied human history through publicly available databases. What he found only deepened his unease. Humans had gone from primitive tool use to nuclear weapons in roughly 12,000 years, an eye blink by galactic standards. They had survived multiple extinction-level events on their homeworld. They had domesticated dozens of species, including apex predators that should have been impossible to tame. They had colonized every environment on their planet, from frozen poles to burning deserts to the depths of their oceans. They had fought wars of extinction against their own species and somehow channeled that violence into eventual cooperation. They had developed philosophical frameworks for coexistence while maintaining the ability to wage total war. They were simultaneously the most peaceful and most violent species in their planet's history, and now they were moving into space with the same relentless persistence they had used to dominate Earth. Creven found records of human responses to other species' attempts at manipulation or intimidation. The pattern was clear. Humans would attempt diplomatic solutions first, exhausting every peaceful option, but once convinced that conflict was inevitable, they would commit completely, using every advantage and showing remarkable creativity in applying violence. They had not yet fought a major war in space, but Creven could see the potential. Human tactics emphasized mobility, endurance, and psychological warfare. They studied their enemies thoroughly before engaging. They adapted quickly to new situations. They fought as units with coordination that suggested telepathy, but was actually trained discipline. Most species that achieved space travel had moved beyond their violent origins. Their aggressive instincts softened by thousands of years of civilization. Humans were different. They had achieved technology before outgrowing violence. They carried their Deathworld nature into the stars. Creven accessed recordings from the failed mission, watching Marcus Webb and his team in action. He analyzed their movements frame by frame, looking for patterns and weaknesses. He found something else instead. The humans had known about the assassination attempt before Siltha made her move. They had installed those phase detection sensors before the Crimson Hand even accepted the contract. They had identified and tracked all three assassins from the moment they arrived on Meridian Hub. Sarah Chen's mission had not been just about mining rights. It had been bait. The humans had known someone would try to stop the negotiations. They had prepared accordingly, turning the assassination attempt into an intelligence operation. They had not simply survived the Crimson Hand's efforts. They had used them to gather information about criminal methods and capabilities. Nurzex's capture had provided detailed intelligence on exotic toxins and biological tracking. Gorvex's defeat had revealed Crothian combat techniques. Siltha's detection had exposed phasing technology. The humans had turned a defensive operation into an offensive intelligence gathering opportunity. Creven felt something like respect mixing with his fear. These were not victims surviving through luck. These were operators conducting military intelligence operations while maintaining the appearance of civilian diplomatic missions. News from Meridian Hub confirmed his suspicions. Sarah Chen had successfully completed her negotiations. The assassination attempt, now public knowledge, had created sympathy for human positions. Several species that had been neutral in the trade discussions now supported Earth's proposals. The failed contract had actually strengthened humanity's position in galactic politics. The client who had hired the Crimson Hand, still protected by encryption, had achieved the exact opposite of their goal. Creven transmitted his findings to the Council. The implications were clear. Humans were not just dangerous as individuals. They were dangerous as a civilization. They thought strategically, planning multiple moves ahead. They turned adversity into advantage. They learned from every encounter and adapted accordingly. The Council convened an emergency session and emerged with new policies. Human targets were officially blacklisted across all major assassin guilds. The bounty on any human official was automatically tripled to account for extreme risk. Most importantly, criminal organizations were advised to avoid confrontations with humans whenever possible. The message spread through the galactic underworld with shocking speed. Within a week, every major criminal organization had updated their protocols. Within a month, the story of the Crimson Hand's defeat had become a cautionary tale told in whispered tones. Humans were Deathworlders. True Deathworlders, carrying millions of years of survival instincts into every interaction. They were not the strongest or fastest or most technologically advanced, but they were persistent, adaptable, and utterly relentless when threatened. Smart predators recognized superior apex predators and avoided confrontation. The message was clear across criminal networks, in whispered conversations, in encrypted communications. When Deathworlders arrived, you did not fight. You did not challenge. You did not hunt, you fled. Cravan eventually resigned from the Crimson Hand, unable to continue after such comprehensive failure. Siltha retired to her homeworld, her confidence shattered. Gorvex became a security consultant, using his painful lessons to help others avoid his mistakes. Only Nurzex remained in custody, serving a sentence on Meridian Hub. Human authorities treated him fairly according to galactic law. They even provided environmental accommodations for his species' specific needs. He found their professionalism somehow more unsettling than any torture would have been. These were not cruel monsters. They were simply humans doing their jobs, protecting their people, advancing their interests. They were not trying to dominate the galaxy. They were just being themselves. That was what made them so terrifying. Sarah Chen completed her mission and returned to Earth. Her report mentioned the assassination attempt only briefly, focusing instead on the successful trade agreements. The security team's tactical excellence received commendations but no public recognition. That was how humans preferred it, apparently. Quiet competence rather than loud boasting. Marcus Webb and his team moved on to their next assignment, protecting another human diplomat in another region of space. They would face other threats, other challenges. They would approach each one with the same professional calm, the same tactical precision, the same relentless determination, because that was what Deathworlders did. They survived. They adapted. They persisted, and the galaxy was only beginning to understand that humanity's arrival changed everything. Craven watched news feeds from his retirement quarters on Vargoth Prime. Humans were expanding, their influence rapidly, signing treaties, establishing trade routes, building relationships with dozens of species. They were charming and diplomatic, friendly and open, but Craven saw what others missed. Behind every diplomat stood security teams with Deathworld instincts. Behind every trade agreement stood analysts who understood both cooperation and conflict. Behind every friendly gesture stood a species that had climbed to dominance on the most hostile planet in known space. The galaxy would have to adjust to a new reality. Humans were here. Humans were expanding. And humans were apex predators wearing the masks of civilization. The smart ones would welcome them as allies and trading partners. The smart ones would remember that Deathworlders became humanity's closest friends, or their most implacable enemies. With very little middle ground, the foolish ones would challenge them, test them, try to manipulate or intimidate them. The foolish ones would learn what Craven and the Crimson Hand had learned. You do not hunt Deathworlders. You survive them. And if you are very wise, you make sure they never have reason to hunt you. Because when humans started tracking prey, they never stopped until the hunt was finished. That was what persistence predators did. They persisted, always. The galaxy would learn this lesson in time. Some would learn through friendly cooperation. Others would learn through painful conflict. But all would learn eventually. Humanity was here to stay, and the stars would never be the same again. Craven raised a glass of Vargothian spirits in ironic salute to his distant enemies. The humans had beaten him thoroughly, professionally, almost casually. He could respect that even while fearing it. To Deathworlders, he said quietly to his empty quarters, may the rest of us be smart enough to stay on their good side. His terminal chimed with incoming message. Another assassination guild, requesting his consultation on a contract. The target was human. Craven deleted the message without responding. Some lessons were too expensive to teach twice, and some prey were not prey at all. They were predators who had evolved to hunt hunters. The galaxy would adapt, or it would learn to fear the sound of human footsteps, approaching with patient, relentless persistence. Either way, humanity's era had begun, and the assassins knew to run when Deathworlders arrived. The end author's notes. This story explores the HFY, humanity, fuck yeah, trope through the lens of persistence hunting and evolutionary advantages. Humans aren't the strongest, fastest, or most technologically advanced species, but their combination of endurance, pattern recognition, pack bonding, and threat detection
makes them formidable opponents when properly
trained. The story emphasizes that human advantages come not from individual, Superiority, but from millions of years of evolution, on a hostile planet that selected for specific survival traits. These traits, when combined with modern training and technology, create operators who can outthink and outmaneuver opponents who rely primarily on natural abilities.